Happy Sunday, everyone. How you doing? What you reading? How's your weekend been? Who's in the chat? Welcome to another Sunday pub. Good to see you all, although I can't see any of you yet. But my weekend has been pretty nice. I played a lot of board games yesterday. Or not board games. I played a lot of one board game yesterday. Hello, Jerome. Hello, Oza. Hello, Barrel. I don't think I've ever seen you before. Welcome to what looks like, I think, your first Sunday pub. Hey, Tornal. Good to see you all. I also had an eventful reading weekend. I finished... what did I finish? I finished something. I don't remember what I finished. What was I playing? A friend of mine bought Lord of the Rings Journeys in Middle-earth, which is a pretty involved board game. Hello, Raph.
Hey, Matt. How are you doing this wonderful Sunday evening?
Pretty good. I was just
Well,
saying.
cheers to that.
Cheers. I've got, it doesn't make noises and you can't see it, but I've got a nice glass of cognac.
That sounds fancy.
Yeah.
Which I guess is fitting to your Lord of the Rings Journeys in Middle-earth game.
Exactly. Lord of the Rings Journeys in Middle-earth. It's like, it actually, it strikes a good balance between Gloomhaven and playable. You know, like Gloomhaven is insanely complicated, and I know lots of people that own it and like it. I don't know anyone who's ever finished it because it's one of those, like, you play a campaign and you play a session, and then the next session you pick up where you left off. And Journeys in Middle-earth works the same way, just it's not insanely complicated, which was my feeling about Gloomhaven the first time I tried it.
Yeah, there's a bunch of these like incredibly involved board games. I keep forgetting which one it was. With a sci-fi theme that had like the tagline on the box that says like "Big boys need big games." And I'm like, you know what kind of audience they're catering for.
Yeah. No question about that. Yeah. Yeah, and I started the second book of Amber, The Guns of Avalon, which is pretty good so far, although it has some weird things in it that probably nobody would put in a book today. And I decided very spontaneously to reread Dune starting tomorrow. Just because the movie's coming, and Angela from Do Unicorns Read is, I think she's hosting it, I think. Varsha and some other people are all doing sort of a read along.
Yeah.
And she pinged me about it, and I was like, actually, I probably should reread Dune. Yeah, it'd be nice.
Yeah.
And got basically a month until the movie comes out at the end of February. So hello, Kat. Hello, Johan. Just finished watching Terminator 2. That's a fun movie. Good evening, Anitha. Daniel. His brother-in-law has Gloomhaven, and it's great fun, but he always did all the setup. Yeah, that's the other thing with Gloomhaven. It literally takes a fucking hour to set up the game to the point where you can start playing. And like, if you're someone who lives in America and has a house with a basement, where you have like a room in your basement where you can say, this is my gaming room, and I have a permanent table where Gloomhaven lives, and you don't have to pack it all away every single time you play it. For me, it's even worse because where I'm sitting right now is my desk. And it's also basically the only table in my house that is large enough to even think about playing a board game on. So for me, it's clear everything off my desk, including my monitor and keyboard and everything. And then I could start setting up a game. Good evening, Kat.
Good evening.
How are you doing?
Hey.
I have only 2 exams left, so I'm
Hooray.
counting down the days.
Excellent. And
What
then
topics are still open?
then you're a what? Then you graduate and you have what degree?
No, I have 2 exams left this month. I still have a year and a half.
Graduate from the semester.
Yeah. Okay. You're not
What-
end examining,
What
right?
subjects are still open for you?
Tomorrow I have interpretation of Latin literature. So it's Catullus. And then on Wednesday, I don't know how to translate the title, but it's basically you get a Latin text that you can't prepare, and it's just translate the thing.
Okay.
Oh yeah, I had to do that like in high school. My high school Latin exam was exactly that. And I had to translate
Yep.
something.
Me too. I also had Latin in high school.
Yeah.
Because I
French
didn't
in
want to
high
be able to
school and
speak a
forgot all
useful
about it.
language.
Yeah, I had French in high school and I forgot all about it. And then I took Latin as an extra class, which really helped because when I started studying philosophy, having the Latin course, the in Germany it's called Latinum, the one like Latin exam is a prerequisite. And the Latin courses at university are so much harder than the ones in high school. So I was really lucky that I took that extra class that I didn't have to in high school because it made things so much easier when I went to university.
Evie.
Hi, Evie.
Hello.
How you
Good,
doing?
good evening. Sorry. Jerome is calling us jobless bums because we are getting drunk on a Sunday night. First of all, Jerome, if you're an adult and you have any practice, drinking does not necessarily mean getting drunk.
Yes.
Only if you're a teenager is that the case. And secondly, I'm between jobs and I'm enjoying myself, so you can get fucked.
He's right about me. I am very much a jobless bum, but I did not start early enough to actually get drunk tonight.
Exactly. And I mean, one glass or even 2 glasses of cognac like this will maybe make me slightly tipsy, but nowhere near drunk.
Yeah.
Rogue is reading Ship of Destiny. You lucky boy. It's such a good book. Oh my God. That trilogy is just awesome in general.
Certainly
and
beats
that book
the second book of
specifically.
Nephi.
Second book of what?
The second book of Nephi.
Oh, is that part of the Book of Mormon?
Yeah, that's part of the Book of Mormon. That's where
Yeah.
I'm currently at.
Yeah, you can also fuck off with your Book of Mormon. Oh my God. Like, I think it's great that you're reading it, but you can't read that and expect anything interesting or exciting. Maybe interesting, not exciting.
Interesting, definitely exciting. There's some pretty gnarly stuff later in there when people are struggling and there's a lot of battles, and because this is
I want
written in
to
like the
see
19th
a
century.
paperback. I want to see a paperback copy of the Book of Mormon printed with that on the cover. There's some pretty gnarly stuff in there. Ralph Blutaxt.
That would be fun.
Religion the way it ought to be written. George R. R. Martin.
Exactly.
Tornall says, Raf, you were right about Bernardo Gui. I have no idea what that is, but
That's the Inquisitor guy from Name of the Rose that we talked about last week when I claimed that he didn't kill as many people as, is currently said and thought.
BellTube, as usual, Brian goes out of his way. He was explaining this in one of his videos recently. His social media marketing strategy is to go in everybody else's comments and ask weird standing out questions. And he asked me, why doesn't Berlin rhyme with Merlin? It does in German.
In German, it does.
Because you pronounce Merlin in a different way as well in German. So in German, it's Berlin and Merlin.
In Dutch,
Although
it
the emphasis is in different places. The emphasis. It's Berlin, and then the other one is Merlin. Merlin, yeah. So
in Dutch it's Berlin and Merlin, so it's rhymed as well.
Yeah. So yeah, Brian, can I make it so? I'm not sure I have the energy to even bother trying.
Well, you're already drinking
Berlin
cognac, and I'm pretty
Berlin,
sure that
there
will
you
help.
go.
What's that? Sorry.
Oh no,
Mhm.
I was just being uneducated Southerner and just being like Berlin and Merlin.
Berlin and Merlin.
That sounds like a
Yeah.
like a comedy duo or something.
Yeah, and to be
Berlin
fair,
and Merlin.
Berlin and Merlin. Yeah, and to be fair, the more cognac you drink, the more Berlin and Merlin sound the same.
Yeah, but the more they even are the same.
Yeah, that's true.
Not just the words, but in essence, the concepts behind the words.
What
Yeah.
is the German city equivalent of Lady of the Lake then?
Essen. Which is only funny to Raf, but
Yeah.
yeah, no, I don't know. The first one that came to mind tonight was Essen, because I was just half an hour ago, I was on my Xbox and I was playing on the network with some friends, and they were discussing what would be the ugliest German city. And according to them, it would probably, in their experience, it would be Essen. But I've never been there, so I have no opinion on the matter.
You've
To
never
me, it would
been
be
there?
Frankfurt.
You've never been to Essen?
No, because I've never gone to the
Spiel.
big game convention. Spiel.
That's the one I was. Yeah,
It's
I've
the
been
only
there.
reason anyone would ever go to Essen, I
Essen.
think. Yeah.
There's a few others. There's at least one. Oh, there's two interesting clubs. If you're into underground music, then there's like two interesting underground rock music, I should say, places that do a lot of stuff there. So I've been there for concerts, but I've also
Okay.
been to Essen for the Spiel, the Games Expo, and it's overwhelming. But you know, the board game and especially role playing game hall, because they have like an entire hall just for that, is pretty impressive.
Yeah, no, I'd love to actually go sometime. It's just never really worked out. The only thing I know about Essen, or the only opinion I have about Essen, is when I learned German, and I learned that the verb to eat is Essen. And then I learned that there was a city in Germany called Eating. I thought, that's funny, kind of. Not really laugh out loud kind of funny. It's not that funny, but weird.
Like
Yeah.
British snobs go to a school called Eton, so I mean,
That's true. Yeah. But at least it's not exactly spelled the same way as
That
the
is
past
true.
tense of eating. Yeah. Yeah, they don't actually sound exactly the same, Anita. But it's just emphasis.
Yeah.
Similar. Do your boots burn if you touch Yankee soil, Evie?
I responded to Tharnal. Alas, I live in New
Uh-huh.
England, so I
Oh, you
Yeah,
live in New England. I didn't know that. With an
I
accent like yours, I had assumed for much further south.
well, so I was emphasizing my southern accent. I have been told frequently that I don't sound like I'm from the South. And I'm like, good, because I've spent years trying to mask my accent. Even living in the South. But
It comes out every now and then. And I partially grew up in the deep South, like Florida, Georgia, and I notice Southern accents. And I know enough Southern people who are trying to hide their accents that to me is another accent that I recognize.
well, I mean, I also my dad was in the military, so like I grew up as a hodgepodge. Oh, Fitz,
Yeah,
I'm distracted.
Fitz tail over there. Yeah.
So I like to say that I'm a hodgepodge from the South because
Right.
I was born in New Jersey, but I moved from there to Texas, El Paso, Texas, when I was less than a year old. And then
Okay.
I was raised in El Paso, Texas, Fort Knox, Kentucky, and then Tennessee for the majority of my youth. I didn't move to New England until I was 20. Math is hard. 26.
Okay. All right.
so is New England just full of towns that are full of people that are slowly turning into fish monsters? Because that's all I know about New England.
Pretty much.
Yes.
So
Okay.
Most of them have been fish monsters for generations already, actually.
That is also true.
Notable travel writer H.P. Lovecraft was correct then.
Yes, exactly.
So
Yeah.
speaking of town names, there's a town in Pennsylvania called Intercourse.
And there's a town in Pennsylvania called Blue Balls.
There is.
Yeah.
That's
There's
good. We have a
Pennsylvania
town.
has the weirdest town names in
Yeah.
America. Like, if you really look close at a detailed map where all the small towns are labeled, there are some really strange ones.
Maybe they brought that from like. There's a lot of Germans like living in Pennsylvania. Maybe that's that because we have some really weird names. Like when I visit my mom, I always go past a town that is called Großrohrheim, which means big pipe town. Which must
I mean,
be
there's also a town in Germany called Ficken,
yeah, I know.
which is literally just fucking,
Yeah.
and that's the name of the town. So
We have a town called Buitenland, which means abroad. So I can go abroad while not going abroad.
Ah!
I will be right back. I need batteries.
So do you have like a university in abroad so you can study abroad?
I don't think, but if you live in abroad and you study at home, then you study abroad.
Yeah, sounds reasonable.
Hey. You guys probably already mentioned it, but what are you all reading?
Cat
Um,
textbooks for Latin.
I'm reading this, but there's no English translation of it out. It's an Italian book.
Oh, cool.
I can try and butcher the Italian name. So in Italian, it's Il Guardiano della Collina dei Ciliegi, I think, which would mean something like the guardian of the cherry hill.
Is it like a fantasy or is it like lit ficky or?
It's lit ficky. It's about it's historical. It's about a guy who really exists. He was a Japanese athlete who participated in the Olympics of 1912 in marathon running, but during the marathon disappeared. So no one knew where he was. And then many years later, he just turned up and then finished the marathon. And so his official time is like, wait, it's in the back. It's 54 years, 8 months, 6 days, 5 hours, 32 minutes, and 20 seconds.
Wow.
Well, I do respect the tenacity to actually finish the thing.
I also
Yes.
love they recorded that.
Sorry, I was interrupted, but I do want to finish. You know, I'll get to
And
the
so
end.
this book is just like imagining what happened in those 50 years where no one knew where he was.
Did you
So
ever
this-
speak
this-
about it?
This actually happened. This is like a real person.
This is a real thing. This is a real person.
And
Okay.
apart from the novel, like Raf said, did he ever give an interview afterwards and say, "Oh yeah, you know, I just realized I wanted to live in another country for 50 years or something"? I mean, like, that's a pretty bizarre mystery. I'm sure a lot of people were like, "Dude, you have to tell us what the fuck."
I don't know. It just said that the author was working for a sports magazine and then suddenly saw this guy's official time for the marathon and was intrigued and wrote a story about him. I don't.
Wow. There's definitely an interesting story behind that. I mean, like,
Yeah.
you don't just realize that you left the stove on and go home and then think, oh, 54 years later, I'll come back and finish the marathon. Like, that's really bizarre.
I'm a horse girl, so I guess I should note down the Green Riders, High King's Tomb.
Yeah.
Book I didn't.
Maybe I'm a horse boy, but I'm definitely a horse person.
What was I was reading High King's Tomb, Part 3 of Green Rider. I keep hearing about Green Rider, but I don't remember what I should think about it.
I tried the first book, which is called Green Rider,
Yeah.
and it didn't work for me. So it's very
Okay, and-
classical in its like.
And you're like full-on horse girl.
Yeah.
You're like as horse girl as it gets. So,
Well, so like to be fair, to give it like it was the writing style, and I bounced right off of the writing style within like the first
fair enough.
30 pages, and I'm like, this isn't for me. So.
Yeah. Daniel read about a dog that ran a half marathon, came first in women's and 7th overall. Yeah, it's kind of unfair, really. Like letting a quadruped compete in a bipedal race.
They should probably double their time, I guess.
Yeah.
And I'm just reading the Book of Mormon right now, and then I'll move on into the Doctrines and Covenants and the Pearl of Great Price.
You're always reading shit I've never heard of.
No, those are just the other writings by Joseph Smith. So the Book of Mormon is his Bible fanfic, and the Doctrines and Covenants are his revelations that are much more about the actual, stuff Mormons or members of the Latter-day Saints Church are supposed to believe.
Right.
And the Pearl of Great Price is sort of a pamphlet that a British follower published in the 19th century that has some excerpts, some revelations, and some further translations from never existing biblical texts like the Book of Abraham and some stuff like that is in there. So there's sort of like that sort of those three things together are sort of the core of Mormon belief, or the sources, basically.
I'm sorry, I have to go back to the dog that ran the marathon. Daniel's next message was her owner thought she was wandering around their property. Had no idea until a neighbor sent her a picture of her dog wearing a medal. Kyle, I'm pretending I can't see your message because you're just trolling. Just always thought the Book of Mormon is Bible Part 3. Yeah.
Sort of, and also not. The Quran is definitely Bible Part 3. The Book of Mormon is way more Bible on AO3.
Okay.
Because it's set, so technically it tells the story of those people, the Nephites and so forth, who leave Jerusalem 600 BCE. Because right before the Babylonian captivity, and then set sail to America and then do stuff in America. So it quotes from stuff like Isaiah and so forth from the Old Testament, but they also already know about Jesus coming and stuff like that. It's a bit weird. So it's more like full on like spin-off fanfic and not like a.
So it's Bible 2 Electric Boogaloo, as Daniel.
It's very much that.
I think that's actually printed like as a subtitle in the cover.
Yeah,
I'm gonna make my own Bible with blackjack and hookers.
So far, the word whoredom has been mentioned once. So we're getting
whoredom, not whores, but whoredom.
Yes, it's actually
like it's a kingdom of whores.
Yeah, it's part of you find it in the Old Testament as well. I think it's Hosea. I think it's Hosea, one of those lesser prophets. Hosea 1.2, I think, is like, and the Lord spake unto Hosea, go down into Judea and speak to them, and take a whore for thy wife, and father whore's children, because all of Israel is full of whoredom. That's the part they never teach you in Bible class.
Okay, it's been a long time since I read the Bible.
So that's like whoredom is like the King James translation, and Luther translates it as Hurerei in German, which is very much the same word as whoredom. So yeah, that's Hosea.
Although Hurerei in German, I would translate more as whoring or something like that. It's like the activity of it, but whoredom sounds like a whole culture of whores, or like, I don't know.
So, Ree Tharnell's comment, whoring can be erased depending upon how you do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway,
Now, I need to
terrible jokes. Okay, I'm done.
I need to interrogate Mr. Belltube. Like, when you say my people, do you come from Mormons?
Jews. He meant Jews.
But we weren't. Okay, because he wrote that when Raph was talking about
the Mormons think that they are descendants of ancient Jews that sailed to America.
Right. Okay. I
Yes.
missed something there. Right.
What's interesting is that in the book of Nephi, that first one, when they leave Jerusalem and hang out in the wilderness, they're constantly referencing the Jews, but also claiming that they are descended from the tribe of Joseph. And I'm like, what is it now? Are you part of the
Make up
Jews
your mind.
or not? I mean, it is a very interesting document so far when you want to look at, say, early 19th century piety, especially because it starts in upstate New York, like everything else in like the 1820s starts in upstate New York, where, you know, Spiritism starts and all the craziness starts around like the 1820s. It kind of begins from there, and it does reflect a lot of, you know, piety that is sort of wrestling with the problems that come with, say, Calvinism and the ideas of like a very spiritual God that is very much apart from the universe, whereas Mormonism, the God of Mormonism is a very active God. And, you know, they believe in continuous revelations and stuff like that. So it does sort of lead to that, is an answer, I think, in a lot of ways, to the need for faith, but to the need for faith that does, in fact, that is understandable and can be grasped by people without years and years of theology studying. I think that's sort of where the Mormonism starts in, with, you know, plus the beginning of sort of an understanding of an American or US identity, which is something you see starting in like the 1810s, 1820s.
Brian,
So it's really interesting for that.
I would actually posit that the Ark is a really good proof for Jewish sailing ability, because it was a boat full of animals that was the only thing that didn't sink. Like,
But
it actually
it's not
got
really-
the animals back to the dry land afterwards.
So it's not really sailing. It's more that they just floated for a bit and then.
Well,
once
yeah, okay. So you can say
finally-
that maybe Jews are good shipwrights. Maybe they're not good sailors.
See,
I don't
here's-
think the Ark
yeah.
was ever described as having sails, but it was built
No.
well enough to, what was it, 100 days or whatever it was? How long
Yeah.
was the flood?
40 days.
True.
40
And
days,
it's only,
whatever. And
it's fairly
it stayed
small
afloat.
too. What's interesting is, have you guys ever read Declare by Tim Powers? To bring it back to fantasy.
I have read Tim Powers, but not Declare.
Declare is really cool. It's sort of like a Cold War spy story, but features the Ark of the Covenant, not the Ark of the Covenant, but the actual Ark. And it does, in fact, also feature Jin and, you know, Kim Philby and the whole traitors around that. It's a really interesting kind of Cold War spy story. I really like it.
Yeah, I keep meaning to read more
Tim Powers.
Yeah.
So here's another thing. I
I
want to
remember. I don't even remember which novel I read, but I know I read
the
one-
Anubis Gates, possibly.
I think it might have been the Anubis Gates. Yeah.
It's like
a
sort of
long
like
time ago.
London, 19th and 18th century London, and Samuel Taylor Coleridge plays a larger role, and this weird horror clown
Right. Weird horror clown. Okay.
that runs sort of like a sort of Dickens style, runs like a beggar underground sort of thing. So
Okay.
since I read it, but here's the thing: I want to write a book, and I want to name it Covenant, so everyone who gets a copy can, in advance, can tell everyone that they're now reading the Ark of the Covenant.
I thought Evie was the only one making bad jokes here tonight.
No.
Apparently not. She does not have an exclusive license on dad jokes.
Anyways, Matt, what are you reading?
I am reading
The Guns of Avalon.
this chunky book. No, I'm not really reading this chunky book. This chunky book is 10 really thin books. This is The Complete Book of Amber by Roger Zelazny, and I'm reading the second Amber book called The Guns of Avalon, and it is overall really good, and it has some weird, I won't say weird sex shit, because there are absolutely no like described sex scenes or any of that stuff that people really
Do they
hate,
use
and I
the
also
word
don't really enjoy.
whore?
Huh?
Do they use the word whore?
There is no whoredom in the book.
No.
So far. And I mean, this is actually my, I think, third read. I read it when I was a teenager. I read it again when I was in my 30s, I think. And it's really good. But the main thing I really like about it is it has a really interesting world idea or universe idea. Like the world building in it, I think is very interesting.
It's heavily influenced by Jung, I think, like by Jungian psychology.
Yeah, it has a lot to do with
Archetypes.
archetypes, and the basic idea is that there is a place called Amber, and it is absolutely real and absolutely immutable. And there's a place called Chaos, which is like the opposite, but it's also absolutely real, but it's completely mutable, constantly changing. And they are at different ends of a spectrum of infinite dimensions in between. And if you're from Amber or you're from Chaos, or actually if you're born to the royal families of Amber or Chaos, you can walk through shadow by basically imagining how the world should be, and it becomes that way. But you have to change it like sort of piece by piece. So you can say, okay, I want there to be a storm and the weather changes. And then I want the trees to be blue and, that kind of thing. And that
So
you
jump
build
from
up the
parallel
place
dimension to parallel dimension mostly.
Yeah, exactly. So, and no, Jerome, I would say Amber is not much like Moorcock's Multiverse at all. Because Moorcock's Multiverse doesn't have any universal concept, really. Moorcock's Multiverse is basically just a way for him to pretend that a lot of characters that really aren't very connected are actually connected.
And just rewriting the same story over and over again.
Kind of. I mean, yeah. I wouldn't necessarily put it that disparagingly, but
so I'd say that facetiously. That's probably not the right word, but
that is the right word. Facetiously. Yeah.
Oh, there you go. I do love the Elric books, but I refuse to believe in my headcanon, Skraeling Tree and the White Wolf's Son do not exist in my world. Like, I hate those books so much. The last two.
Yeah, and whatever you do not read the one that he recently published.
You mean the Citadel of Forgotten Myth?
Exactly. The guy I was playing board games with yesterday, one of my best friends, Jason, is one of the hugest Elric fans in the world. And he read the brand new book and he said, I really wish I hadn't. It's so bad. We were just discussing it last night. He was just like, oh my God, so horrible. Yeah, okay. I get what you mean, Jerome, Law versus Chaos. Yes. But
I think it's very different between those two. With Law and Chaos are fighting over the different worlds of the universe.
Exactly.
With Amber, there's no real fight. I mean, yes, there is.
It's just reality. It's just reality.
Yeah.
Amber exists, and it is pure order, and it's very static. And Chaos exists, and it is pure chaos, and they're both the two poles of what is absolutely real, and they cast shadows between them. And shadows are these infinite dimensions.
Yeah. What Daniel mentioned. Really important though, that our world where we live right now
is a shadow.
It's a shadow. It's not Amber. It's not the real world. We live somewhere in the shadows because obviously that's kind of where like the whole free will versus predestination and volatility and stuff like that comes in. And you go closer to Chaos and you have worlds where there's like rocks floating and stuff like that. And
and the landscape moves around and the sky changes color constantly or whatever.
Yeah, and there's this annoying talking raven.
Yeah, exactly. And Amber has a royal family, which are a bunch of people who are constantly manipulating each other and plotting against each other, basically.
Yes.
And they're messy. Someone asked me, Thornall asked me, who's my favorite Amber prince? I find myself liking Gerard a lot, although he's probably the dumbest one. But he also seems to be the goodest one, the least asshole of all of the Amber princes.
I like Random because he becomes a drummer in a jazz band because he hates to be an immortal prince.
Yeah. Random is also fun, but I kind of like Gerard. Mm-hmm. Anyway, we voted
to sprint
on the Fireside Discord. And not everybody, but the majority agreed that we were going to do sprints. So let's do a sprint until 5 past.
And remember to let your dog sprint too.
Exactly, because your dog
Or
may
a
win.
marathon.
What'd you say, Con? Sorry.
Or let them run a marathon.
Exactly.
Yes.
Cool. So enjoy.
Hello, Joanna. Hello, Ron. How'd you guys do? Opening up another beer, I see.
Yeah.
And here.
Look, what can I do? I'm reading the Book of Mormon. I need to counteract that by doing something that is apparently illegal.
Well,
Although
yeah.
not yet, because apparently the law that forbids to drink coffee, tea, all kinds of other stuff is not part of the Book of Mormon. It just happens to be one of the later pronouncements. So for now, they're still whoredom and drinking.
Whoredom and drinking.
They
It
don't
just
want-
was
What we're
brought up
here
again.
for. Whoredom.
Yeah,
They don't want to have fun. You know, they don't like fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
well, there's a part very early on when Nephi is sent back to Jerusalem by his father to bring back the bronze tablets that have like his family lineage and possibly the Ten Commandments on them, and the high priest who never gets named before really doesn't want to give them up, and then Nephi goes back and he finds the guy drunk in the street, so he just decapitates him and takes the bronze tablets.
Fun. Very fun.
As you do.
It does have that fanfic vibe to it in a lot of ways.
Hello, Ron. Hello, Joanna. Yeah, the bit of amber that I was just reading, it started feeling like these are all really thin books. Like they're like 120, 150 pages each, which is why, this it's a big thick book, but it's 10 books. Yeah. And
Is the second one the one when he has to go and find random in that tower with the
No.
floating rocks?
no,
Okay, that's the third one.
random I think is not in this book at all, because I'm pretty close to the end and he hasn't been so far. But
All right, this one is when they just like make guns to actually attack.
Exactly. And it's I'm near the end, and it's interesting because the pacing has suddenly gotten really fast.
Yeah.
Like he's shorthanding a whole bunch of stuff that's happening, just because you can see he wanted to spend a lot of time on building something up so that something else could be done. And the bit in between he didn't really want to deal with. And also maybe he was kind of getting to the agreed upon sort of rough length of the book.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Oh, yeah, no, I need to rush this bit fast forward this bit a bit and get to the end." So yeah, it's getting pretty close. Ron is reading Wild Cards. Oh my God, I read Wild Cards when I was in high school. Yeah, if you don't know Wild Cards, it's an alternate history, I think sort of starting in the 1930s.
Like
where
superheroes that are
there
sort
are-
of genetic mutants.
Yeah,
I
there are
think?
genetic mutations, which I think are engineered. I don't remember, but yeah, it's basically sort of the actual world history, except there are superheroes, and they, take part in the Second World War, and Second World War, of course, goes differently because of it, and that kind of thing. And it's a whole series of books which were edited by George R.R. Martin, I believe.
George R. Martin is part,
Or
I
at
think
least
it's
some of
Martin
them.
and one other guy kind of started it, and it's sort of one of these
Yeah.
shared world things, like Thieves' World earlier on.
Lots of
and
different people write bits in Wild
I
Cards.
don't know if Martin is still doing anything for it. He used to do stuff
Yeah, I
even in
don't
the
know if he is
2000s. He
either.
was still doing stuff
Yeah.
for it, but I don't know. Maybe he's kept from writing wildcard stories by watching football or something.
Yeah, he said writing The Winds of Winter is certainly not keeping him from doing that, because he's not writing The Winds of Winter apparently. But
Ron says that it's an alien virus that caused it.
exactly, Exactly. It's an alien virus that causes it, and which is basically just the setup. It's like we have a world just like ours, but there are superheroes.
Yeah, if you like
yeah.
Second World War, there's a bunch of superheroes in World War II kind of books. I think it's not Daniel Abraham, but it's another guy from the sort of George R. Martin orbit that wrote one called the Milky Way Triptych or something like that.
Hmm.
I haven't read that one. I
Daniel
have
says
read-
he's read 23 of the Wild Cards books and he's quite behind on the series. I don't even know how many of them there are. I think I read all of them that were out when I was a teenager, which was like 4
thousands.
or 5, back then. But yeah, it's apparent. I didn't even realize that it was still ongoing, that they were still publishing Wild Cards books. And Thieves World, that also takes me back.
Them.
Colin's here. Hello, Colin.
Wait, so is Wild? So I was at the bookstore yesterday.
Yeah.
And I saw Wild Cards in the
Yeah.
graphic novel section. Are they graphic novels or are they?
No, they're like the original series was novels. They have
okay.
made some graphic novels based on
Some
what
of the
goes on in
stories.
the novels, as far as I'm sure. Mark
Yeah.
Lawrence is doing Wild Cards now. Okay. Wow. Damn.
So I guess the rape count is going higher up now.
I guess. And Gurm is still editing, apparently. Okay. Right. Yeah,
Okay.
and it's like this big shared world. So there are all these different characters that belong to different authors. And there, you'll have one book and it'll have a couple of different stories by different authors about different superhero characters. There goes the Fitz. Yeah, and it like Thieves World. Thieves World stopped at some point, didn't it? It's not continuing.
They finally are actually
I read
putting
those
out
back in the day,
audiobook
too.
versions of the Thieves World collections, though, which
Ah,
is
okay.
really good.
Yeah, Thieves World was a more traditional fantasy kind of thing. I think it was all set basically in one city, but it was a city where basically everyone in the city is a thief. I mean, I'm being facetious in a way, but it's basically just like a lot of thieves, and all of the story kind of rotates around the Thieves Guild and different thieves doing thiefy things. And it was also a very shared universe with lots of different authors contributing and whatever. Daniel says the rape count was bad enough already.
Oh boy.
I barely remember the Wild Cards things. I remember, like, all I really remember about Wild Cards is World War II with superheroes. I don't even remember who any of the superheroes were or what went on in the stories or any of that. So, and just to make Evie happy and Fitz unhappy.
Excellent.
There she is.
I didn't know she had a white spot on her head.
She has the weirdest. She has the weirdest white spot. It's completely asymmetrical. What? It's just this weird white blob. It's not even in the center of her head, and it's totally white. Nothing else on her entire body is completely white, and it looks like someone dropped bleach on her forehead.
I wonder if maybe she got injured.
Super
and
white.
That's like
Could be. She doesn't. I mean, I can't feel a scar or anything there, but yeah, she's got a bizarre white spot in the middle of her head. And if my browser suddenly closes, it's because she walked across my keyboard. No, she didn't. It's really weird also with the cat. Like, sometimes she will extremely carefully and daintily walk across my desk and avoid bumping or stepping on anything. And then sometimes she's just like, nah, fuck it. And she'll go straight across the keyboard, knock over my vape, almost knock over my drink. Like, I don't know. It's a mood thing.
it's definitely a cat thing, because earlier my poor sweet cat, I call her the most uncoordinated cat on the planet. Sometimes she's like very like skillfully walking across things, and other times like she just tried earlier this morning she tried just literally walking from here onto my lap, and my legs were out, so she could, easily get there. Totally missed a step, and you saw her just dropping. Like, and I'm like, seriously, Kat, you're so
They're
uncoordinated.
so entertaining sometimes. Fitz likes to sit on my desk. I was working. Fitz is sitting on the corner of my desk, on her side, kind of in a circular form like cats do, kind of just relaxing. And she's looking at me the whole time. And then all of a sudden she goes like this and falls off, like her eyes get really big and she falls off the desk backwards. No idea why. Just out of nowhere, suddenly she's slipping and goes off backwards.
And then
Colin
she
is
acts like
asking
she
this.
totally meant to do that, right?
Yeah, exactly. And my desk is not that high, so she didn't even land on her feet. She's like boom on the floor. Colin is asking, Matt Nevey, we've read The Spear. Have we finished it with this read along? I have. I finished
have
it
not.
2 days ago. Because after day 3, I was just like, there's no fucking way I'm taking a break. I have to keep going. This is just exciting. I just got too into it, and I was just finished. Like from day 3, I finished it in a day and a half or 2 days.
Yeah, I just finished day 3 yesterday.
I still haven't started.
Yeah. It's really good.
I know.
Good.
It is still on my phone. Already on my phone. I just haven't started it yet because, I got sidetracked by a really interesting nonfiction book last week. So I read the one about Reformations by Carlos Eyre, which started out good and got not as good near the end. With my criticisms are probably very nerdy and not that relevant. But
I thought you were going to say I got distracted by the Book of Mormon. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense.
No. No, and then because he tries to be as neutral as possible in his writing. He's a professor a history professor in Harvard or whatever, and then he throws shade at Stephen Greenblatt's The Swerve in a massive way for a book that is otherwise trying to be really neutral. So I had to check out The Swerve because it was also free on Audible, and it won a Pulitzer and the National Book Award. So I figured I'd give that one a shot, and it was a really, really fun read. It's nonfiction about the rediscovery of Lucretius De Rerum Naturae, which is a poem on the nature of things, which is an Epicurean poem, and it was rediscovered in 1417 by a humanist in a monastery that is possibly, because no one knows which monastery it was, but it probably was Fulda, which is really close to where I live. And it kind of changed a lot of things, and a lot of Renaissance thinkers read that Lucretius poem. So it's a really fun, small historical nonfiction. Not too, you can't hold it up to academic standards at this point, but it's really entertaining, and it did show what you can do with really good writing in the nonfiction department, because it's just so brilliantly well written.
Hello, Tori. Tori's joined us. And the poor person's book reviewer, whose real name I still don't know, has joined us. Hello. Somebody pointed out that the white spot on my cat's head is a badger lock, and that actually totally makes sense, considering her name is Fitz. Having a little bit of white hair. Yeah, actually, it never occurred to me, but yeah. She's got an extremely appropriate white spot on her head. Strange cat. Yeah, I just totally spontaneously, because mood reading is my motto this year, decided to read Dune again for the, I don't know, 8th time or something. To get prepared for the movie that I can't wait to see.
You've seen part 1, right?
I've seen part 1 9 times.
Oh, okay. It was just,
of course.
I did not really like it that much, though. Part 1.
I loved it.
Thank you. It's not just okay. Take it. My main criticism, and really my own. Well, one of my 2 criticisms of Dune Part 1 is they screwed Lady Jessica.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
They're
what
building up this
way?
weird like father-son thing with Leto and Paul. And what annoyed me, yes, they're definitely pushing Lady Jessica to the back. I mean, maybe he's doing something more with her now in part 2, but the other part that disappointed me, and I see why he's doing it, but for me, Dune has always been very much about psychedelic things and about, opening up your mind, and the whole psychedelic stuff is sort of pushed to the side to make it way more clearly about ecology and environmental stuff. And I get why he's doing it, but I kind of like the weird psychedelic stuff in Dune, and I was missing that in part 1. And
So
you can see how he's doing that with the movie, right? He starts the movie with that whole sort of prequel kind of setting up the setting and stuff and so forth. And the novel starts with Paul overhearing the Mother Superior and Jessica, and then goes and does the Gom Jabbar thing. And that is like placed in the middle of the movie. And that changes the whole perspective on the whole thing.
My
Yeah.
frustration is that it's not that they, well, not only did they put Lady Jessica to the back burner, by spoiler alert, anyone that hasn't seen Dune Part 1 or read Dune, they made it seem like it was Paul's idea to be like to take advantage of the prophecy with the Fremen. That's all
Which-
Lady Jessica's, like that was all
Yeah.
her as a Bene
I mean,
Gesserit.
it's not
Also-
even her as a person. And I mean, they didn't make a big deal out of it in the movie, but they did explain that the Bene Gesserit have sown the seeds and basically
Right.
created a religion for them.
Right, but they are putting the emphasis on Paul that it's his idea to use that and leverage it to
Yeah,
really
and that
just
does,
force
and that's a
the Fremen.
problem because it
And-
takes away from the idea that I mean, you can read Dune as a criticism of the white savior story and of the hero's journey and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And that only works if you understand that everyone is manipulated into doing that because it has been set up forever and so forth. But if
Yeah.
Paul actually takes action, goes like, hey, they have this weird prophecy, let me do something with that, he does become the white
But it
savior
was-
that he's
it was
definitely not
clear.
supposed to be.
It was clear in the movies that like it's only there for him to take advantage of because the Bene Gesserit built it up.
Right,
Yeah,
they-
but
they
they still
set the whole
actively
thing up.
choose to do so.
Yeah, my point is it was Lady Jessica is the one to drive Paul to take advantage of it.
Yeah.
Whereas it was Paul in the movie, Paul's like, oh, hey, I'm going to take advantage of this prophecy. And then on top of that, they made Lady Jessica so freaking weepy. Every single scene that she was in, she was so ridiculously over the top emotional. And yes, she is emotional in very few scenes in the book. But that's the juxtaposition.
Because she's a Bene
of her
Gesserit,
training
she's
as a
100%
Bene Gesserit.
in control of her mind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I will say that I have hope for part 2, at least just based on the trailer, because while I agree, Raph, like I like the kind of psychedelic stuff of it, I also like the kind of anti-colonial theses and the kind of ecological themes that he explores as well. And it seems like, again, just based on the trailer, it could be wrong, like the whole movie could just be a whole farce based on that, but it seems like they're going to be leaning more into that and like addressing that type of thing of the colonial mindset
It's
and stuff like that. So I'm hoping it'll like
It's also
not
the
quite
place where
one,
the
but-
really like if you like the psychedelic stuff, the bit that's covered in the first movie is also not particularly psychedelic in the books.
Yeah, that's
Like
true.
the really
Right,
weird
you don't-
psychedelic stuff starts in what's in part 2, the movie.
well,
Like,
I would
that's
actually
where the
argue
really
that, like,
crazy weird stuff starts happening.
well, I would actually argue that it doesn't actually get psychedelic until the last half of Children of Dune in the books.
Yeah, but
That's
like
when it gets
in the
really
in the
fucking
in the
weird.
second half of the book, you've got the Water of Life, which is pretty freaky.
But
Right?
that's
And
kind of
But it's
once
not
you get into
necessarily-
that, it
I
gets
wouldn't say it's psychedelic. I would say
weird.
it's like At least in comparison to like Children of Dune. and
It
stuff.
gets even weirder in Children of Dune. For
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah, but I
And it
think
goes off the wall in God Emperor. So
yeah, I think the
Yeah.
difference, however, is that even though you don't have like the full-on psychedelic stuff happening in the book, there is that sort of spiritual, sort of non-material, metaphysical dimension that is sort of a superstructure for all of Dune, and that has been taken away, possibly because it's not exactly something that you can pull off
Portray.
sincerely.
I was a little disappointed, honestly, because they were one of the things I thought was coolest the first time I read it in the books. In the movies, it's not really even clear what a mentat is.
Yeah.
And what they do. Like their eyes roll back and they can calculate stuff. That's about all you get, like, clearly laid out in the movie. And I was like, yeah, I feel like they sort of sold the mentats a bit short. Could have been more.
But
Thornall
they've done
said he
some
did not
clever
like
things.
the portrayal of the Sardaukar.
The Sardaukar. Yeah.
I actually liked the Sardaukar in the movie. They weren't exactly like I was imagining them in the books necessarily, but I thought they were actually pretty good. Like, they are fanatic, super brutal, kind of crazy people soldiers, and I thought the movie did that pretty well.
Yeah, what I liked was that they mentioned he's really good. Villeneuve is really good at doing the fan service for the actual hardcore fans, like including the bull's head in the first movie that is mentioned in the book because it's the bull that killed Letho's father during a stupid bullfight. And having that show up in the movie, I think is a very clever marketing way. If you're making that kind of movie to please and bind the fans of the book to you, because you show you've read the book, and then they'll forgive you all kinds of other stuff because those small details are matching up.
Yeah. No, I really liked. I mean, part of it maybe for me also. I'm a super visual movie watcher, and I'm constantly looking at production design and the visual design of the movie and all of that. And I thought, like, a lot of it really fit the way I had imagined things and the way things are described.
Yeah,
in the book.
Obviously,
I'm
just missing Patrick Stewart using a plastic bag to hide from a nuclear strike.
Yeah. I have some nostalgic joy in David Lynch's version.
have any of you all seen the sci-fi
TV
series? Yeah.
No.
Of Dune and Children of Dune?
I'd like to, actually, but I don't know anywhere that I can actually get it.
I have also been trying to find it, but I think Children of Dune was the first adaptation I saw after reading the Dune series. Oddly.
Okay.
I never watched the Dune miniseries.
Odd.
The Dune miniseries is really bad.
Oh, listen. It was my introduction to James McAvoy, and thank God. So,
Okay, well, look,
James
it does important things for Evie. It does not necessarily do good things for the books.
Yeah.
I
Colin,
think because they were
when am I
trying to
starting
convince.
Dune?
Yeah.
The whole point of starting Dune, Colin, anytime soon, is to read it before the movie comes out, and the movie comes out at the end of February. So I am actually probably starting it tomorrow. In the next sprint, I may finish what I'm reading right now, and then I will start Dune. So yeah, a little bit early. And you say you've never read it before. Shame. No, not really. But yeah, it's well worth reading. It is, if only because it's such classic, influential sci-fi. Like, there are so many things, including Star Wars, which were just like heavily influenced by Dune.
I think that's kind of the thing, is like, when you go and read, people are now reading Sun Eater and really enjoying it, and I'm happy for them. But it's like, you got to read Dune before you, or reading Dune gives you a perspective on where things are coming from with Star Wars, with Sun Eater, with things like that.
Dune was basically, at its time, the peak science fiction novels or novel. Like, it was the best-selling, it was the most read, it was the most influential, it was the most popular in its time. And so many things that come after it are so clearly influenced by it. It's well worth reading. It's weird for a lot of people, and it was weird for me last time I reread it because I didn't realize I'd become very used to not reading things in third person omniscient. And it took me a little while to sort of get back into third person omniscient because it feels a little strange, you know.
See, that's where I'm happy that I'm always reading Discworld, because Terry Pratchett is
right.
Third person omniscient, constantly breaking all the fourth walls that are in a room, and more, and
yeah,
it helps.
Yeah.
I had to read, well, didn't have to read, but I read Dune in high school.
Wow.
School, because we had a list and we get pick one, and Dune was on there because
wow,
it was my teacher's favorite book of all time.
That's progressive.
And so
wow,
I read Dune for that.
Yeah, when
Awesome.
I got to pick a book for in high school for English class, I chose A Clockwork Orange, which probably also tells you a lot about who I was at age 15.
I also read Clockwork Orange for one of my classes in high school. Although I think the thing that stuck with me the most that I read in high school, which was also something I got to choose, but from a limited list of things, was The Sound and the Fury by William Faulkner.
I have not read that yet.
It's really interesting. It's also really good. I mean, I think Faulkner, I read a bunch of other things by Faulkner as well after that, but it was the first Faulkner I'd ever read, and it was the first novel, anything like it, that I had ever read. There is a perspective that he writes in the it's about a family, and one of the kids in the family is probably what you would call autistic today. Like, I don't think even in his time, I don't even know if the word autistic even existed yet, but like, it was basically talked about it, the kid being mentally retarded or whatever, but it's the first perspective you get in the book, and it's so disorienting. Like, at the beginning of the book, you don't have any idea what the fuck is going on. Because you're getting this kid's perspective, how they perceive the world, and he writes it really, really well. And it's an excellent book. It's an excellent book. I really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I reread it. Not Sound of Fury, but I reread Clockwork Orange last year, and I really, really enjoyed it. I realized that reading it in English at age 15 in English class was definitely stretching the limits of my language skills at the time.
Yeah. I mean,
because it's not easy to read even if you know English.
Yeah. But yeah, I can only strongly recommend that anyone that's even tangentially interested in science fiction read Dune.
Very much
and
so.
my rule is there are only 4 books. Right? There are actually more, but screw them. There are only 4 books.
You're missing out on Miles Tech, who is pretty cool. And you're missing out about the wonderful knowledge that Bene Gesserit learn how to control the temperature of their vaginas. Consciously.
Yeah, I'm okay with
Are
missing
you
out on
talking
that.
about the Brian Herbert books? Because this
This is already in the that's in Chapter House and Heretics. That's still Frank Herbert.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I
It's still weird.
I refuse to read anything by Brian Herbert.
Yeah,
me too.
It's not like, I mean, from on the surface, it seems like a very similar situation to Tolkien, right? Tolkien wrote really only 2 books, The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, right? And I mean, Lord of the Rings has been broken up into a trilogy, but he intended it to be a book. So he wrote 2 books. And everything else, which is a lot, like my Tolkien shelf is this long, and only this much of that is Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. Everything else was either put together by his son, Christopher Tolkien, based on his notes and stuff he had partially written and stuff like that, or it was written by someone else entirely
But I
in
think some of the
collaboration with Christopher
short
Tolkien.
stories were like here, Farmer Giles of Ham and stuff like that was already finished by. It's been published before.
But they're really short. Like Farmer Giles
Yeah.
of Ham and The Adventures of Tom Bombadil and Leaf
The
by
Elf
Eagle
Star
and
and
all of
what's
those
his
things. They're really, really short.
But the
And
difference is
Christopher Tolkien did actually a pretty good job, and he was sticking to he was writing, most of them are just history and
Yeah,
lore,
and
they're
when
not
he-
presented as novels or like
True.
stories.
Yeah, and this is someone who has only read Fellowship of the Ring, so take this with a grain of salt. This is just me from an outside, just me being angry perspective, with no actually like to stand on. It seems like Christopher Tolkien actually respected his father's legacy, where Brian Herbert is just screwing Frank Herbert.
Yeah, I mean, Christopher Tolkien had like a lot of involvement with Tolkien, with J.R.R. Tolkien before that. And when Christopher Tolkien was editing the Silmarillion, he got himself a up-and-coming fantasy writer to help him write. Just as Brian Herbert got,
GGK,
just as Brian Herbert got himself a sci-fi writer to help write these Dune books, but he picked fucking Kevin J. Anderson. So
yeah.
No,
I haven't tried them, so I guess in a way I'm not qualified to talk about anything or even have an opinion about anything beyond God Emperor of Dune. But I've pretty much unanimously heard from everybody I know who has tried to read them that So I just don't feel at all compelled to even try with those. I mean, God Emperor of Dune honestly can be hard to get through.
I like it.
I also, of course, you like it. You have a fucking degree in philosophy. It's a philosophy book.
What's your?
It's
you're
not
right.
a novel. I mean, it's almost not a novel anymore. It's like a novel that exists to present a whole bunch of thoughts.
So, what's your favorite Duncan Idaho?
The Duncan Idaho. There is only one. Yeah. Yeah. No, I like. Well, and the other big thing, it's funny actually. I was talking to my friend Jason about this just last night. The other big difference, like if you on the surface, what happened with J.R.R. Tolkien and his son looks like what happened with Frank Herbert and his son, but the difference, and Pete just mentioned this, the difference is J.R.R. Tolkien was a professor who was working on the world for decades. And he had folders and folders and folders and notebooks and whatever. He had meters of material. And Frank Herbert was just writing novels, right? He didn't have a world developed nearly in the way that Tolkien did. He was just making shit up to write his novels. And yeah, Brian Herbert was forced, I think, just to make a bunch of shit up himself.
And I think that's like another part that we kind of often ignore when we look at that. Like the stuff that has been published posthumously by Christopher Tolkien in all these different versions, most of that is not exactly...
I have to interrupt you, Raph, just to honor... I just have to interrupt you to honor Ron's comment. Your own private Duncan Idaho. Anyway, go on.
Yeah. No, but I think the interesting part is like the Silmarillion was already there was already a lot done before Tolkien passed and Christopher and JGK took over. But beyond that, there's very little additional plot that Christopher Tolkien ever had to look at.
No,
we get different versions of stuff, and you have like fragments and stuff, and you have the 3 or 4 versions of Beren Luthien that has Tevildo, Prince of Cats in it, which is beautiful, and you have the Fall of Gondolin in like rhyme and in 2 different versions, which is also awesome. You have all these different versions, but the plots have already they were fairly well set down by Tolkien, so you don't have Christopher Tolkien coming up with like, so what's going to happen like 20 years after Lord of the Rings? Let me write this new, thing that Tolkien started writing. I think that's sort of like Tolkien started writing a sequel to Lord of the Rings that takes place years later with like a Cult of Sauron slowly starting, and he abandoned it immediately. And the Brian Herbert move would be for Christopher Tolkien, God rest his soul now as well, to go and write and finish that book instead of just going through the archives. And I think that's a massive difference of writing new novels versus,
fleshing out,
filling out the corners.
Yeah. And I mean, everything with posthumous Tolkien is history that happens well before Lord of the Rings, so or The Hobbit, So that was one thing in the movie where I was like, that was the only thing in the movie. In June, back to June, the only thing in the movie where I was like visually disturbed to start with was Jason Momoa as Duncan Idaho. I was like, no, you can go straight to hell with Jason Momoa as Duncan Idaho. Duncan Idaho doesn't look anything like that. And just in my head, like the picture I had of Duncan Idaho in my head, that he was extremely thin and wiry, and I don't even know if he's described that way in the books. I don't remember, but somehow that was my picture. And
he's described as drunk.
But then the movie, Jason Momoa played the role, I thought, so well that I was like, actually, sure, okay, he's actually a pretty awesome Duncan Idaho.
I keep hearing. Sorry, my dog has a toy. A lot of the critique that I hear is like, oh, Duncan Idaho, Jason Momoa having this incredible fight scene or whatever. This is not Dune, blah blah blah. Well, if you actually read past, if you've read these series, you realize that it's expanded on in Children of Dune, that you go into that fight scene where Duncan is remembering his original self, and that he took down 15 Sardaukar or whatever, by himself. Like, that's a freaking fight scene.
Duncan Idaho is basically the biggest badass in the entire book, like hands down. And I have and also like it always makes me really tired when anybody expects an adaptation into another medium to be exactly the same. Yeah. It's like, I would be bored to death if it was scene for scene exactly like the book, because the book has all sorts of interior stuff going on, and and that stuff's really interesting in a book. But I don't want a Dune movie with no action scenes. That would be crap. Here he is again, Brian, coming up with questions. I have a question. Have any of you ever read a book that you think would have been much better if another author wrote it? That is an interesting question, as usual, Mr. Bell.
Anything by Brandon Sanderson. I'm not joking.
I can totally understand you thinking that too. It's like if somebody who can write better than Sando had written in his world. Yeah. Well,
having finished Wheel of Time, I would say the first 11 books. Now, to be fair, I'm a bit facetious here, but I had an instance, but I have forgotten which one it was. But there's sometimes situations where, like, this is sort of like an author trying to do something where their actual strengths are not, and I know exactly the author who's really good at that very specific thing.
Yeah, I mean, I like reading the Stormlight Archive. I very often, while I was reading it, had the feeling this isn't necessary.
Yeah.
This whole chunk of detail that's going on right now isn't really doing anything for me as a reader. Personal taste. I know a lot of people love maybe a lot of that stuff, exactly the stuff I'm talking about, but I kept thinking that all of the Stormlight Archive books, each of them could have been half as long and maybe been more exciting for it. It just seemed like there was a lot of fluff and a lot of detail, unnecessary detail and whatever. And I think there are a lot of authors who could have done that better, and been
And
more sharp and concise.
Assuming Stormlight is very similar to the Final Empire, and Elantris, very repetitive.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's my Sanderson. I'm obviously going to be the Sanderson, the internet's foremost Sanderson expert by the end of the year. Until then, I've only read the first stuff, the first Mistborn trilogy, Alloy of Law, and the stuff he wrote for Wheel of Time. And yeah, he does repeat things, which I think makes him sometimes more accessible to newer readers, because he makes sure in a way that I have learned as a dungeon master, as a game master in D&D, to make sure that my players actually got the thing that I said, because sometimes that's important. And I'm sure Matt will back me up on that. It's like, you tell your players there's this situation, and they do the stupidest thing, like, did you realize that I told you that there's a lot of screaming coming from behind that door? And they're like, yeah, no, we totally did. And it's like, well, I said it 3 times already. And Sanderson makes sure you get every stake very clearly, because he repeats it ad nauseum. And
I had a Pendragon campaign I was running, and in the first adventure, Pendragon, you play knights in King Arthur's court, and the knights are traveling somewhere in my game, and it wasn't even really part of the adventure. It's just like they had to get somewhere, and we did a short sort of traveling montage thing, and there was one encounter along the way. There's a ravine kind of thing that they have to go through, and I described in detail the ambush that was basically waiting for them.
Yeah.
And not saying it's an ambush, but like basically saying it's an ambush.
Yeah.
And they were like, we keep writing. And I was like, okay, wait a sec. I just want to make sure. And I went over the description again, and they were like, yeah, we just keep writing. And I was like,
yeah,
you're dumb enough. You deserve this.
Yeah.
And they rode straight into the ambush, and they all got killed.
Yeah. And I think that's sort of what Sanderson makes sure that doesn't happen to his readers. You don't get surprised.
Rogue also pointed this out, and this was also my feeling. Sanderson is not funny. Ever. Like I could tell he was doing humor. Like he was pushing at it. Maybe my humor is just a bit too dirty for his extremely clean view of the world. Yeah. But like all of his jokes and the little funny things he set up felt like dad jokes to me. I was just
I like dad funny. Jokes, but I
don't mind dad jokes, but like they're not funny. That's why they're funny. You know?
Yeah,
the joke is it's not funny.
Which is, I think his humor works best in the Wax and Wayne series, because there you have Wax and Wayne are that sort of like buddy cop vibe they have is a good setup for really cringy dad jokes, because you already have that built into like the characters in a way. So it doesn't it didn't stick out as much there. I'm like, that's on brand for the story you're telling. I'm groaning along instead of groaning against the plot, so to speak.
Yeah. I keep thinking we should get back to sprints. And I keep forgetting because we're having an interesting conversation. But why don't we do a 10-2 until 20 past sprint?
Mm-hmm.
I am going to drop because my husband wants to... I think he wants to make dinner, even though I literally just ate right before I came up here. So I don't know why he wants more food. But
all right.
Anyways, I never said what I was reading, but this might make both of you happy. I am reading Bleak Seasons.
Woo!
Ooh!
You and Matt.
I love it. It's probably one of my favorite Black Company books. So
I read them long enough.
Why do you need help with it?
Have a clear memory.
So what's your impression so far?
I like it. I mean, Croker's still my favorite narrator, but I already like Mergen. He's great.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of spoiled myself in regards to, because I looked at the back of the book and I'm like, wait, this isn't like after, what is it, Dreams of Steel.
It's parallel.
And so I looked up like just like the first line of the plot summary on Wikipedia of
Cool.
just to know like when this
Mhm.
took place, and I realized it was concurrent to Dreams of Steel, essentially.
Yeah.
And I spoiled an aspect of Merkin's character, which came like a couple chapters later, so it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah. I do really appreciate what he's trying. Like, what I like so much about the different narrators and the general progression of Black Company is how Glenn Cook tries out new things every time. How he goes for different tones, different styles, and this one is obviously the one with the nested narratives of Mergen doing like three things. There's like three nested narratives, I think, in this one, and it's new for Black Company, and he does it really well.
Yeah.
And I remember when I read it for the first time, I got surprised a couple of times because that was back in the day when I did not have that much of an internet.
Yeah. And the thing that I really appreciate as well is, I mean, he's already so good at making characters so distinct in the dialogue,
Mhm.
even within that first book, even it's through, which is even more of a feat because you're getting it just from Crooker's perspective. So you get all these other characters that are still so rich and distinct in their voices, but then additionally you're getting these other narrative perspectives, first person narrative perspectives from, in this case, Lady up to this point, and then now Mergen, and I'm like, these are, when you're reading their perspective, this
You know
is
who it is.
This is Mergen.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's I agree. It's incredibly well done what Cook does with like narrative voice. It's
So before we get into another big discussion, let's start a sprint.
I'm gonna drop 2 now. I'm gonna go to bed.
All right.
So.
good luck with
All
your
right.
exam.
Yeah, good luck with the exams. So let's go until 25 past, just to give ourselves a little time.
all right, thanks for letting
Bye,
me join.
ladies.
Have a good
Thanks
night.
for joining.
Good night.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye. think it's 25. I hope Matt's going to be back soon because I don't want to take over his pub.
Hello.
Hey. I finished the second book of Nephi, which is all the Nephis I can take for one day.
I finished the second book of Amber,
Which is
How
all
was-
the ambers you can take for one day?
which is probably all the Amber I could take for one day. Yeah, it's the pacing is really weird. Like the last
I know.
the last 10 or 20% of it is like super rushed. Which just felt a little bit weird. It's like, I'm going to go and do this thing. I'm going to go and do this thing. I'm going to go and do this thing. Okay, it's done. And like,
Yeah, I know
it's
what
a
you mean.
little bit odd.
But I mean,
anyway.
the first one is also this super,
Meet Death Cult is in the chat.
yeah.
I think this is the first time I've ever seen him on any of my things. Welcome.
Welcome, Moid. Yep, he's certainly never been on anything I do.
No, well, and I like our stuff just doesn't overlap very much because whatever, I don't know. I love his channel. I love going there and checking out sci-fi stuff. I don't read that much sci-fi that often, but I just said I'm about to reread Dune for the millionth time. So
I
getting
just
into
like
a bit more
while
sci-fi.
I was finishing the book of Nephi, I got access to the second and third book of the of an M. John Harrison trilogy that I really wanted to finish, and I might take a break from Mormonism by reading Nova Swing and Empty Space by M. John Harrison now, because
Yeah, I don't think anyone would blame you for taking a break from Mormonism for a while. That's pretty understandable if you ask me. Yeah.
And I'm so excited. I have to share that. Like, a friend messaged me right now. He's reading. I got him to read King of Morning, Queen of Day by Ian MacDonald, and it's one of those books that I really love that no one knows about, which is sad.
I know the title, but otherwise not.
It's a fascinating book. It's about fairies and people in Ireland, and people in Ireland fighting fairies with samurai swords.
Okay. That sounds interesting, maybe?
It's sort of like a fantasy sci-fi cyberpunk story. It starts out like in 1913. And it's sort of like mostly like written like a diary in the first part, and then it switches to like the daughter of the narrator of the first part in like the 1930s in Dublin, and then it switches to her granddaughter in 1989 in Dublin, and her granddaughter is full on cyberpunk fighting fairies with samurai swords that have been cybered up with weird technology.
Okay, interesting. Poor Person's book reviewer started Dead House Gates today. Congratulations.
Hooray!
You're on quite a journey. Feels like I'm starting a whole other series. Yes, it does. Wait till you get to Midnight Tides. Being a huge Malazan fan, beginning Midnight Tides made me want to punch Steven Erikson. Because every book, if you don't know Malazan, every book starts with not every book, but pretty much every book, certainly the first 5 or 6, starts with a totally new place, with 80% new cast of characters, that kind of thing, except for Midnight Tides, which is a totally new place and nobody you've ever seen before is in it. In the entire book. It's just like, here's a totally new thing.
Midnight Tides might be my favorite, though.
It's definitely in the top 3, but like at the beginning of it, I was like, I wanted to go back to the people I love. And
but here's the thing: once you read them like in like one long go, you realize
except Troll. That's right, Troll Singar.
And he sets up the beginning of Midnight Tides at the end of House of Chains when Troll and
sure.
So it was like, so tell me about it. Let me tell you about the days of high adventure, and then.
Yeah. I mean, there are connections, and it certainly all comes together later, but like at the beginning of Midnight Tides, it's just like I don't know what's going on. I am in a totally new thing. Brian, I have not read The Worm Ouroboros. Hello, Britain. I have not read The Worm Ouroboros. I do
Why not?
have it because it looks really boring.
It had a
I know.
huge impact on Tolkien, though.
Yeah, no, I know. I mentioned it like I did a pre-Tolkien fantasy
I know,
video
I know.
a while ago, and it was in there. It was on the list, but I think actually all of those books I was only mentioning from research. I was not mentioning
Yeah.
from having read any of them. But like Blood in the Mist, I really want to read. I keep almost grabbing
It's
it off my
beautiful.
shelf.
Blood in the Mist is
it
absolutely
looks-
fantastic. I love it.
It
It's
looks a lot
really
of,
good.
and I mean, King of Elfland's Daughter, I would also like to pick up
That one's
at
also
some
brilliant.
point. Yeah, and Worm Ouroboros, I've looked at it and like just opening it and reading like the first page, you're like, whoa, okay, this looks like work. But
Hey, you like Malazan? It should be fine.
it's no in no way related to Malazan. It's more related just because it looks like work because of the language.
The language is pretty
And-
brutal, yeah.
Yeah, but I'm someone who
very much
reads
that style.
I'm someone who reads Le Morte d'Arthur for fun. So you know,
Yeah, you
the
should be
language
fine.
is similar-ish. So yeah, Brian says I might like it intellectually, and I think I might, but I have to
Mm.
be in the mood for something that is meaty and requires thorough chewing before swallowing,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
think-
You know,
Yeah, from my experience, I would say that both King of Elfland's Daughter and Blood in the Mist are definitely more entertaining and more.
they look a lot
accessible.
lighter. You know, like they just look like stories that you can just read.
And
And
both of those, both Blood in the Mist is really fascinating. I really love that book,
Yeah.
and King of Elfland's Daughter. They have these elements of very sort of British irony in it, but you can that kind of moved onwards to people like Neil Gaiman and up to a point here Pratchett. Blood in the Mist is obviously it also has a Neil Gaiman in
Forward.
right now.
Didn't
Of course it does.
didn't he do the forward for it?
that's what we just said.
Oh,
He did it, and you can. There's bits and pieces in Blood in the Mist that you can see have very much inspired Stardust by Neil Gaiman in a similar way that, say, A Fine and Private Place by Peter S. Beagle inspired the Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. It's very clear in that regard. King of Elfland's Daughter is different. It has a weirdly dreamlike quality, and then it switches to these moments that are very funny in this British way. Whenever like the villagers meet up and have the village meet, like the village council meets, and it's always made clear what kind of mead they are drinking, and depending on the kind of mead they're drinking, the more fanciful their ideas are, which they then bring to the lord of the country, and then
Okay.
the duke or the lord has to accede to their wishes, and they want his son to marry someone from Elfland because they want magic in their kingdom, and little
Yeah.
do they know what that entails.
Yeah, of course.
It's a beautiful story. I loved it very much.
Yeah, cool.
yeah, it's one of those books I've always wanted to get to. If we're still talking like King of Elfland's Daughter, or I actually own King of Elfland's Daughter. I just haven't read it yet.
Yeah,
It's
I've
really
got
good.
like because I did that video a while back, I
Mm-hmm.
bought all of those books as well. So I have
Yeah.
I don't know 5 or 6 pre-Tolkien fantasy things on my shelf. I haven't read any of them yet, but I do want to get to them, and it certainly looks like for me it looked like there was kind of a scale. And on one end was like Blood in the Mist, on the other end was Worm Ouroboros. And it's like
Every
Blood in the
now
Mist
and
looks like something I would pick up because it's fun and it's easy and it's just a story. And Worm Ouroboros looked a lot more like work.
To be fair, there's a lot of like things in Blood in the Mist that are more than just a story, right? The author Hope Merleys was a friend of Virginia Woolf's, and there's a lot of like early 1920s feminism and folklore tied into that, and it does infuse the story, and it makes the story better and fun.
Yeah.
But it's not just stupid stuff, right? Not just action or anything of the sorts. There's a lot of social critique in there.
It's just like if I pick both of them up and I open up the first page, like I can just read Blood in the Mist.
Yeah.
You know, and I might think about the content, but I don't have to think about the language. Whereas we're more
the language is this sort of like tongue-in-cheek British irony style that, you know, people like Pratchett and Gaiman also have.
It's easy to read. It doesn't mean there are no concepts in the book, but it's easy to read. Whereas Worm Ouroboros, for me, looks like the same thing as reading Le Morte d'Arthur, which, you know, I do, but you have to read it a bit slowly, and you have to think about the language sometimes, and you have to look up words. You know,
yeah, Edison is certainly trying real hard to make the language feel heavy.
Yeah. Exactly.
I keep forgetting which other books you mentioned in that video. I watched it back then,
World's End.
By Hope Hodgins.
William Morrison.
Oh, Morris. Oh, yeah, right.
Or Morris. Yeah, William Morris.
William Morris.
I haven't got my shelf. They're in the shelf around the corner. Blood in the Mist, Worm Ouroboros, World's End, King Elfland's Daughter. I think there were 5 or maybe 6. I don't remember the other ones, but
you ever read Arthur Machen? Machen, however you pronounce the man.
I have not.
He's also like one of those like prequel writers. He probably had more of an impact on Lovecraft and Robert E. Howard.
Right.
Like the famous story is the one called The Bowman.
Okay.
Which The Bowman is really fascinating. So The Bowman is a story he wrote. It's the one that he wrote in like 1915, sort of, to support the troops, and it's about this British group, this troop of British soldiers fighting against the Germans somewhere in France, near Agincourt.
Okay,
and then the spirits of dead British bowmen kind of rise up and help them fight the Germans.
Okay.
And what's interesting about that like little sort of patriotic ghost story is that because it became so popular, you have people coming back from the war later on and saying, yes, I fought there and I did see that happen, which is super fascinating.
Okay.
That you have people like Machen made this up, and then soldiers come like, yeah, I saw this. we had those long bowmen fighting along
bowman ghosts fighting with us, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. All right. Interesting. Yeah, I haven't been. I'm really my head is all over the place about what to read this year.
Mm-hmm.
It's really.
I mean, The Bowman is like a 20-30 page short story. It was published in a journal, like a newspaper. It's like a really short one.
Right. That's obviously pretty easy. Although even when you mentioned short stories, I have in the last 6 months, I think, collected 10 collections of short stories. And so I already have more than enough short stories to also get to.
Yeah.
But
You're right, Ron. William Hope Hodgson, House
He was a horror writer.
Is one of those, like another one of those weird, incredibly influential stories that we often ignore because it impacted so many writers that we then read.
Right. Yeah, the stuff with the walking in shadow, like I mentioned it for anyone who doesn't know Amber. I mentioned it earlier, there's chaos on one end of the spectrum and there's Amber on the other, and they are places, and everything in between are infinite, literally infinite variations, which are more normal and stable on the Amber end of the spectrum and more weird and chaotic on the chaos end of the spectrum. And people can walk in between, or some people who have the power can walk in between. And the passages where Zelazny describes these, they're called shadow walks or hell rides if they're trying to go really, really fast. The passages where he describes those are very psychedelic and weird, and written in a different style than the rest of the novel as well, to make them feel strange and kind of psychedelic.
I really love them. The hell rides are just like, and I don't know. Have you ever played the Amber Diceless game?
I used to. It's actually really funny. My relationship with the Amber Diceless game. So, first of all, my best friend here in Berlin used to actually work with Steve Wujcik on the Amber Diceless game.
Nice.
He actually wrote one of the supplements for the Amber Diceless game. When I was in university, I was on a thing called a Mush, which was an online role-playing game that was text-based, but it was networked. So you were playing with other people, but everybody was just writing. There were no graphics. It was purely text-based. And I was on Amber Mush. I played a Lord of Chaos on Amber Mush, which was one of these text-based adventures, but it was based in the universe of the Amber novels.
Yeah.
And out of that grew a group where we discovered, a lot of the people I played with, we all discovered that we lived within like a 3-hour drive of each other. And we used to get together once a month, 10 people, and we would crash at one guy's house for the whole weekend and play Amber Diceless, the role-playing game, and get drunk together. And a lot of people ended up sleeping with each other and that kind of stuff as well. It was pretty wild.
That's very much in the spirit of Amber, though.
Absolutely. It was a very Amber style get together.
Like I've never played Amber Diceless. I've always wanted to, but I remember we did like some of those, like, you know, having like all the friends like come over, crash at the same place and play for like, I don't know, 20 hours straight, and then just
for everybody in the chat. I mean, a lot of people, if they know role-playing games at all, only know Dungeons and Dragons. They don't know that there are a million other role-playing games in the world. If you've played Dungeons and Dragons, if you know Dungeons and Dragons, imagine playing that, except you have no stats and there are no dice. Right?
What, just role-playing?
It's role-playing, and when it comes to conflict, every person's character has a ranking in certain things. So, and it's not a ranking like I have 12 and you have 13. It's like I'm the absolute best and you're less good. And maybe Raf's character is less good than yours. So me and you fighting, I'm always going to win unless there's extenuating circumstances. Raf's character, I'm always going to win, but quicker.
Yeah.
And easier.
But you can ask me to help you, and then Matt's
and then
be
the two of us together, or the two of you together, could take my character if you're cooperating with each other. So it's interesting. Oh my god, Brian Bell played Muds. Oh my god, crazy shit! This is this online text-based role-playing games that I was talking about. This is before anything like an MMO existed. This is like decade before World of Warcraft. It was all text-based, and there was programming behind it as well. I learned to program a whole bunch of things. So you could put in a command that would automatically show other people a certain bit of text. For the people who know Amber, I wrote and programmed the Logris on Ambermush.
Wow.
Nobody who doesn't know Amber will have any idea what that means. But if you know the Amber books, the Logris was a collection of code and text that you had to go through to get the power of the Logris, and I programmed and wrote all of that back in the day. Back in 1989 or 1990.
I mean, I've only played in D&D, regular old D&D. Symbaroum,
Sure.
which I really enjoy.
Symbaroum is cool. Cool game.
It's probably my favorite I've played so far.
Yeah.
Mr. Bakuma, which is fun if you like samurai stuff.
Yeah.
And oh man, it's blanking now. I'll look it up later. I can't think of the name. I used it for the first game I ran.
I played D&D in different editions, like back in the day, like not back in the day, but at some point we decided to do some old school playing, and we took like an old, like first edition D&D, and we went and played good old Keep on the Borderland, which is an incredibly fun starting point. I played a lot of Rollmaster. Like our weekend, not playing for 20 hours straight thing. We usually did around New Year's with all our friends coming over to my flatmate and me were both, gamers at the time. And we had all our friends come over for New Year's and we stayed there for like 3 or 4 days and just played Deadlands straight for like
Deadlands
40 hours.
Deadlands is fun.
Yeah. Like the first evening we just watched like an old spaghetti western and got drunk, and then the next day we started playing Deadlands.
That's how it's truly done.
Sounds perfect. Jared is asking if anyone has ever played Bug Hunters. I don't even know what Bug Hunters is, so I don't think I have.
I have not. It sounds like an Alien or a Starship Troopers game.
I was going to say, it sounds like a Starship Troopers inspired something. I don't even know if it's an online game, because we were talking about muds and mushes, or if it's a role-playing game, like a tabletop game.
And I played a lot of Rollmaster and the old,
Jesus.
the Rollmaster connected Middle-earth role-playing game at the MERP.
Yeah, no, Rollmaster. I think I bought a book for Rollmaster back in like the late 80s and was like, whoa, this is a lot more complicated than it needs to be. Forget that. I never got into it. But alien killing role-playing game, tabletop.
Sounds like
it. Yeah. No, I have not played it.
To be fair, I've had fun playing Rollmaster. It was, with a bunch of fellow people at university who all had already played Rollmaster before, so it worked really well once you have 5 people who know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And then it becomes an incredibly powerful rule system that does so many cool things. But yeah, it does have a bit of a steep learning curve.
Yeah, it was just like I was never. I understand, and I'm not dissing anybody who's in it for this. Some people are in it for the rules mastery and the numbers and the math, and they enjoy that. And I hate it. I'm in it for the story and the role playing, and that was always fun for me. And I've gravitated throughout my entire life. I mean, I started playing D&D with first edition back in when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
And since then I've been evolving and moving more and more towards less rules and more role playing.
Yeah.
Systems that are lighter, that have mechanics that support the story rather than the conflict. And playing totally different things like Dungeon World and Apocalypse World and Dogs in the Vineyard, and a lot of these much more story oriented kind of games. I don't even to me D&D is too crunchy these days. I look at D&D and I'm like,
I think D&D 5 does do a lot of things really well, but that's once again that thing, right? I've been playing D&D for 20 years by now, so we just ditch all the rules we don't like. And we're like, D&D 5 works really well.
Sure.
but that's because we've already, gotten rid of all the grappling rules, or the idea of encumbrance has been thrown out the window. All of that stuff has been stripped off. Because in that regard, role-playing games are like cars. The more you cut off, the faster they go.
Yeah, exactly. My encumbrance rule is, would it be ridiculous for you to carry this? That's basically it.
Yeah. Also, would it still be fun if you could carry this? Then maybe I'll make an exception.
Yeah, I actually did a one-shot at a convention a long time ago with normal D&D, and it begins with, you've killed the dragon.
Yeah.
And yeah, exactly. And there's this huge mountain of extremely heavy treasure
Yeah.
And like it was just the whole adventure was basically getting the treasure back to town, which sounds boring, but of course they got attacked along the way. People were trying to rob them.
Yeah.
People were trying to sell them a castle that didn't exist, you know, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And that was kind of fun. But yeah, no, I just don't want to play a game that tries to simulate the world. I want to play a game that creates a good story. That's the main thing. For
Another
me.
one I really enjoyed playing back in the day was Fading Suns, which is, you know, sort of Star Wars meets Dune meets apparently Sun Eater.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I've heard of that. I never played it. My sci-fi game back in the day was Traveler, which is nothing like that. Traveler is
Oh, I've played Traveler before. I love Traveler. You can do
Yeah.
fun things with Traveler.
yeah, like you can die in character generation.
That too.
While you're making your character can die. Which was a little crazy. But
Yeah.
Poor Person's Book Reviewer. So the story with Malazan was
It was a GURP
the
system,
whole-
wasn't it?
No, it wasn't a GURP system. They were playing in a homebrew world that was they were originally running D&D, and then they changed to GURPS.
Yeah.
They never wrote anything for it, like there was never a supplement or anything like that. But it was basically primarily Stephen Erickson and Ian C. Esselmont playing in a world that they created together, and it was just the two of them playing a lot of the time. And then occasionally they had other sessions with other friends of theirs. And the movie part of it is that Gardens of the Moon, the first book, was originally written as a screenplay.
Yes. And you can
And they
tell.
were shopping it around and nobody picked it up. So they decided, okay, Stephen will write a book. And that turned into 10 books, and now sort of with both of them writing, it's up to 25, I think,
Yeah.
books.
And you can totally tell when you read Garden of the Moon, the stuff around the Phoenix Inn with the characters. That's the stuff that works really well for a movie, because you have, you know,
Yeah.
your fixed locations, your very clear like characters. You have the plot line of Murillo and, you know, the gang around Krupp and Murillo and not Malik. What's his name? Rallick. That's it.
Rallick, no.
Not Malik. Rallick.
Rallick.
Rallick. Trying to get the guy his job back. Or
Yeah.
like his title back, and
There's some
that's-
scenes in it also where, like, I would love to see them filmed. I mean, without getting into details and spoilers, the rooftop fights
yeah,
in Darujistan would be so cool as action scenes in movies. Specifically Gardens of the Moon really does feel very cinematic.
Yeah, I've
And-
heard that. I've heard that as like a criticism. My buddy Jason did a video that kind of blew up on his channel.
Why would you
about it.
criticize it for being cinematic?
No, he said he just said it felt like a screenplay at points. Is what he said. Which I
and
thought-
mostly he just completely didn't understand the book because he's
Sounds like it.
not very smart.
I
Sorry.
haven't seen the video and I don't know the guy, so I have nothing to say about that.
He's making claims that just show that he didn't understand what, like, because he's expecting it to be a very specific type of writing, which is obviously is not. Claiming that there's
it's funny how
too many characters and stuff like that, and I'm like, yeah, that's
it's funny
if-
how much
yeah.
criticism Erickson gets for doing really well exactly what he's trying to do.
Yeah, so he left a comment on that video, Raph, a while back.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. If that movie had actually gone into production or anything, it would have been 20 or 25 years ago.
Yeah.
Back when nobody was really doing fantasy movies.
Well,
So-
roughly around Lord of the Rings, though.
Yeah, roughly around Lord of the Rings. I mean, Willow and a few other things had been brought out, but like it wasn't anything like now
Mm.
where
Yeah.
everybody's looking for a fantasy something that they can
I
produce.
think it would have been like you would have think it would have been like a Jodorowsky's Dune.
No, it will be very different. I mean, Hodorkovsky's Dune is Hodorkovsky doing Dune things, which is brilliant. But Erickson has a very specific vision. I think the problem is that we needed Peter Jackson doing the Lord of the Rings thing to show people that yes, fantasy with new technology, versus 80s fantasy, which we all have seen, does actually have sort of potential. It's worth investing in that to do that. And
Special effects had to develop to a certain point before
Yeah.
you could bother doing like actual quality, not trashy, but like quality fantasy stuff.
I wouldn't call 80s fantasy trashy. I just think
A lot of
it
it
had a
is.
different vibe. Oh yeah, but like to be fair, a lot of 2000s fantasy is also pretty trashy.
That's true.
I think there's this like whole thing that like media moves into different directions, and from like the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s over, we've become more gritty, more realistic. But like I think grit doing a lot of heavy lifting to seem realistic,
Yeah.
and fantasy has always sort of lagged behind because we didn't have the effects to make the fantastic stuff, the graphic effects, also the visual effects also look as gritty as what action movies and so forth already had.
Well, and
And
just
Lord of the Rings kind of
just
took
to get
that.
the viewer to the point where you really can fully suspend your disbelief.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You
Yeah,
know, you
exactly.
can just sit there and go, yes, the Balrog and Gandalf being in the same room, I believe that. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, and I think to put to go back to the 80s, it's kind of the difference between the first Conan movie and the second Conan movie. The first one doesn't have that many actual like cheap effects, and it kind of it's it's still like cliche and whatnot, but it feels sincere in what it does because it does not rely on that. But then when you go to the second movie and you have that ridiculous scene with the dragon flying over the lake, and you're like, no, we're done.
Although the first movie, like I rewatched it not too long ago, and the snake,
Yeah,
there's a lot of stuff with the snake where you're just like, oh my god, it's like laugh out loud funny, and it's not meant to be.
Yeah.
I remember the Nostalgia Critics review of that, and he gets to the bit with what James Earl Jones turns into a snake. Some funny shit.
Yeah,
To be fair, I think
but
beyond
most of the movie
all
is
of that,
just practical. It's not effects.
yes,
So,
and I think a lot of it does hold up really well as a practical movie because it's not like true to any specific Robert E. Howard story, but it does capture a lot of the spirit of the Conan story.
it's got Conan feeling. Yeah,
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 in that
yeah.
regard.
yeah.
I was about to say it's solid. I didn't think it was a terrible film.
No, I mean overall I love it. It's just there are some some laugh out loud bits where you can see, and I mean I can't really remember when I watched it. I watched it when it came out, and I'm sure that when it came out watching it, I was into the tension and the risky feeling and the dangerous feeling that they were trying to build up with scenes like the snake. But watching it now, you're just like, oh my god, that just looks so bad.
Have you seen
but
the
that's
animated Lord of the Rings movie that
Of
Bakshi did?
course.
That one is so good.
Yeah.
Or as I like to call it, Lord of the Rings as imagined by Frank Frazetta.
I think
Yeah,
it's
I mean,
really good. Did you know that Peter S.
a lot of fun.
Spiegel worked on the script for that one?
I did not.
Really, I did not know that.
Peter S. Spiegel worked on the script for the Bakshi Lord of the Rings movie.
I have to admit, I don't think I've ever even heard of Peter S. Spiegel until you recently started talking about Peter S. Spiegel.
Really, you've never heard
But
of Last
well, I
Unicorn?
mean, you heard of him, but you didn't know that you heard of him because you
I
of
haven't
course
heard of
the
I haven't
You
heard
heard
of him. I have heard of the titles of some of his books.
The Last Unicorn is one of those
Yes.
things that you
Yeah.
may have
I mean,
heard.
Oh wow, no
I've
shit.
heard
you
of The
really-
Last Unicorn. I've never read it, but I have heard of it. But I just never had the author's name in my head.
Yeah. No, he's a folk singer and a writer, and he's been around a lot.
Yeah.
He's also very much in his 80s and still writing books, which is cool.
Also, he
Thor,
knew Larry
actually, the answer
McMurtry.
to the question, what would Conan do, is
Push wheel. That's nostalgia critic reference. That's good.
Yeah, the Bakshi Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I love John Hurt as Aragorn.
Yeah, I mean the whole thing. I haven't watched it in a very
Though
long
I don't
time,
love Sam.
but it was fun.
I think what's so interesting is that Bakshi really wanted to do the Lord of the Rings thing because he was really into Lord of the Rings, and the movie he did before that was Fritz the Cat, which is a thing.
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe this, but I think you might have probably watched it or know about Fritz the
It's
Cat.
been a long time, but I've seen Fritz the Cat. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And
it's
I just love someone going like, I'll do Fritz the Cat and then I'll do Lord of the Rings.
well, and sticking in that tradition, who do they pick to direct the Lord of the Rings movies? The guy who did Meet the Feebles.
True.
Like Meet the Feebles. Like I heard that I already knew who Peter Jackson was before the movies, which a lot of
Yeah.
people I think didn't because he's just like some Kiwi
Also,
director.
have you ever
who's
seen
done
Bad Taste?
trash? I've seen Bad Taste. I've seen Meet the Feebles. I've
I
seen.
really enjoyed The Frighteners, which
The-
is really funny.
That's when he started getting to the point where it's like, okay, you can actually watch his movies without
He
being
still had a
stoned.
mummy rape scene in that one, though.
Yeah, but I mean, like,
Yeah.
you can't watch stuff he did before Frighteners unless you're stoned.
Unless you're
like
what?
that's stoned. It's the only
Oh.
way you can enjoy Meet the Feebles or A Bad Taste.
Yeah.
And because I grew up in Australia, like Peter Jackson was kind of a cult classic with us, like long before Lord of the Rings, because he made these trashy, ridiculous, hilarious movies.
Yeah.
And we watched Meet the Feebles and Bad Taste and all of those over and over again.
Yeah.
And then it was announced that he was going to be directing Lord of the Rings, and I just thought, oh my God, that's a mistake. How could you give that to him? But I'm super glad I was wrong. He did a very good job. But there were some of the
I bet you felt like an idiot once you saw the movies and they were like, whoa.
no, I was
Right.
relieved. I was super relieved. You know, I was like, okay, so they're nothing like Meet the Feebles. It's good.
Yeah, but I think like what
Heavenly
what-
Creatures, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Heavenly Creatures was also very good.
Yeah.
and more serious. I mean, a hell of a lot more serious than Meet the Feebles or Bad Taste. But yeah, no, I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, I think what worked there was that with stuff like Bad Taste and Meet the Feebles and all the crazy weird shit he did before, what worked there was that he did like for a director. Jackson has a lot of like knowledge of like practical effects and stuff like that that people that maybe
Yeah.
just go through the film school road to directing don't know. So he kind of has like a feeling of what to do and when to use digital effects versus using like practical effects and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That really worked well with Lord of the Rings because.
Well, I mean, he
compared-
certainly did. Like Meet the Feebles and Bad Taste are all prac.
Yeah.
There are no effects because he didn't have any budget, so
yeah,
it's
but
all
and
bad
I-
prac effects.
Yeah, and I think you can tell because when you compare Lord of the Rings, which came out roughly at the same time as, the Star Wars prequels, and you look at like how those two movies, the two franchises use practical versus digital effects, used green screen and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You can tell a massive difference, and I think it comes from Jackson going like, "Well, I've been using the weirdest practical effects I can, get away with for the last 10 years."
Do everything that you can as practical.
Yes,
You know,
exactly.
it is how Lord of the Rings I think was made. It's like, do not depend on we'll fix it in post. Do not depend on we'll
Yeah.
just do this in the computer. Do everything you can through the camera, and only revert to digital when you really can't do it in the camera.
Yeah.
Be like Avatar.
Whereas on the other hand, like George Lucas at the same time was like, wow, I can do things digitally now. I'll just do all the digital and it shows.
Yeah, no, I mean in the original Star Wars movies, like everything was like even the high end special effects were
Yeah,
physical.
Practical.
They had to paint backgrounds to make a planet look bizarre and different, and they had to build physical scale models for everything. And it's amazing looking at the stuff they did back then. But, all that stuff is like, just do it in a computer these days,
I get why
Much
someone
faster.
who had to go through all of that goes like, wow, I can do this on the computer now. Why they are so very enthusiastic about it. But I think, it's I guess the difference, like the difference in time, sort of the distance in time between what Lucas did back then and then he goes back to do Star Wars and like, let's use new technology, and at the same time Jackson was still coming fresh off just using practical effects and having no budget.
Yeah.
And it shows, and I think it helps the Lord of the Rings movies to feel so they have weight to it in a lot of ways, right? Because
everything feels a lot more real, especially since, like, for Tolkien, the landscape is the most consistent character in the entire book.
Yeah.
And shooting it in New Zealand with the variety of landscapes they had and real landscapes.
Yeah.
And not that much bullshit, map painting or digital map painting or whatever backgrounds, but like real landscapes filmed from a helicopter. It just makes the whole thing feel much more believable and real as a movie,
Yeah, I mean, like Green Knight came out a few years ago, and much of that was practical and looks fucking amazing. At least I thought it did.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love
no,
that
it's
film.
a beautiful film. It's a beautiful film.
Yeah, like years ago, I watched this one. There's a Grendel movie featuring Jared Butler. It's called Beowulf and Grendel. And it's all filmed in Iceland. And Grendel is just like an incredibly huge Icelandic dude.
Oh, okay.
It's a really interesting, it's a very low budget kind of B movie kind of thing. Jared Butler is Beowulf, but beyond that, there's like no one because everyone has like two sons in their name.
Right, they're all.
The soundtrack was done by Hilmar Örn Hilmarsson, who is the high priest of the Asatru movement at the moment, and he used to work with Sigur Rós, the alternative rock band.
Yeah.
And it's a super uniquely weird kind of movie because it's all practical. It's all practical, a Beowulf movie that is all practical, filmed in Iceland. And it feels real because you can feel that that chainmail weighs a ton, and everyone is really happy when they can take it off.
I've so many movies. I mean, I'm a bit of a armor and weapons nerd, like medieval armor and weapons nerd.
Yeah,
because I used to actually do historical reenactment, and I used to wear chainmail, actual chainmail that I helped make.
So you were like the Glenn brothers.
Yeah. Yeah, I used to do similar reenactment to what they did. I mean, I also did 16th century reenactment stuff and 14th century and lots of different things.
Yeah.
So I learned Renaissance fencing, for example, based on Renaissance fencing manuals that were actually written back then. But whenever I look at a movie, and it's the vast majority of movies that are portraying some sort of medieval period, and they come up with something that is meant to look like chainmail, doesn't really look like chainmail very much, and totally isn't chainmail. And I'm like, there are people who make chainmail in the world. Why didn't you just get chainmail? I mean, it's uncomfortable to wear, but it makes such a difference. Like it has a sound to it. It has a weight to it.
Yeah.
And like if people are actually wearing actual armor, whether it's chainmail or plate or whatever, you know it. And it adds so much atmosphere immediately, especially if you've got characters who are walking around all the time in the movie wearing armor. I'm just like, why don't you just get some actual armor? It's not that difficult to do.
No, right now I know at least 5 people I could ask to give me.
I'm going to say
tomorrow.
I know people who make this stuff. I can introduce you to them, Hollywood, and they would be happy to make you a bunch of chainmail.
Yeah,
it takes some time, but
I have a friend who made a chainmail bikini just for fun.
As you do. that wouldn't be how I would use my chainmail making skills. But anyway,
Well, he's also
And-
made like proper chainmail, but he also thought like in honor of all those old role-playing games and whatnot, someone has to make a chainmail bikini as well.
yeah, it's important. They need to exist, guys. It is late
Way too
here.
late.
Yeah, for Raph and I anyway. It's
Yeah.
rather late. It's past midnight. I was thinking of squeezing in another sprint, but that's not going to happen because I'm going to go to bed. And Raph probably
have
should
a-
too.
I have a stream in about an hour, so this works out well.
Good luck with
Yeah.
that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Enjoy
Good luck.
painted sweaters, Ron. Yeah, exactly. They
Sure.
like, oh man, there's so much bad chain in so many movies. It's
Yeah.
unbelievable. And I just every time I'm like, just get some fucking chainmail. It's not that hard.
Yeah, I know.
You can
I went-
order
I
it
went to-
online.
I went to a pagan metal concert in Slovenia once, and they because it's Slovenia. They had just a bunch of people in chainmail in the front row, starting like an actual sword fight in the mosh pit.
Okay. Yeah, that shit might fly in Slovenia. You can't do that anywhere else in the world, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of worked because it wasn't too sold out, so everyone just like went back and gave them like a circle to do like within the audience crowd to do like their sword fighting, and the people doing the sword fighting knew what they were doing. To be fair,
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm just really, because I used to do medieval fighting,
Yeah.
and I own 2 swords, and I'm really like, whenever someone comes over to my flat for the first time, they're like, "Oh, you have a sword," and I'm like, "Wait a sec, before you touch it, don't point it at anyone, don't swing it inside the flat,
yeah,
and it's sharp. Be aware that the point could go through a person and the edge could take an arm off. So you're handling a weapon. It's not decoration, right?"
Yeah.
And
So
like,
it's a
I'm-
literal dead ass sword. That's nice.
yeah, I mean, well, one of them is. One of them I have cut through relatively thick pieces of wood with it.
yeah. I mean,
so
they
it's
use
an
like
actual
training
sword.
swords with like a blunt edge because
Yeah.
obviously, like you do.
But even
usually.
those, I mean, if you accidentally hit someone in the crowd,
Yeah.
it will break bones. Like if it's
Yeah,
an actual
still,
metal
it's still a
sword with
long
blunt
piece
edge,
of relatively thin metal that
Yeah.
will hit.
yeah,
hard.
they're serious. Like
You have a good
I always-
home defense in case someone tries to rob
no,
you.
it's horrible home defense. What I need for home defense is a shortened baseball bat,
Yeah.
but a
Take-
meter and a half long
Strike 'em
sword
down.
swinging it in my flat. I'd be really lucky to hit anybody with it. I'd probably just put a big gash in my wall. That's
Yeah.
like you don't swing them around. You need a lot of space to use a 1.5 hand sword. Like both of my swords are kind of bastard swords, and you need a good bit of space to use those without taking chunks out of your wall. Anyway, like I said, it's the end of the stream. Thank you everyone in the comments and on the screen for
Go get
joining the
yourself
Sunday
some
Pub again.
chainmail.
Exactly. Go buy some chainmail. Yeah, actually, Ron, I do need to. If I want home defense, I need to buy a short sword. That would be a lot more useful. Yeah, Usa. I was also surprised. I mean, I have a replica of Anduril, and the edges are not sharp, right? So, like, you're not going to cut your finger just by putting your thumb on the edge.
Yeah.
But the point, you can't have a sword with a blunt point that doesn't look like it has a blunt point, and therefore doesn't really look like a convincing sword. So, if you tried, it would not be hard to skewer a person with the replica of Anduril, because it is sharp at the point. But my other sword, which I made myself, I thought if it's going to be a sword, it should be sharp everywhere. So the edges are actually sharp. So you have to be careful also with the edges. So
I still love how Terry Pratchett, when he was knighted, actually forged a sword, or had like a friend forge a sword for him.
Yeah.
And then because you're not allowed to have like sharp weapons of that length in England, he buried it in his garden.
You're probably not allowed to have sharp weapons of that length in Germany either. I
Yeah.
haven't checked the laws, but yeah. Anyway, good night, everybody. Next weekend, Sunday pub as usual. I've been thinking about starting it an hour early, basically just for me and Raf, and maybe also our British friends. But if you're not on the Fireside Discord, that is where the announcement always is for this. Also, the links for joining on the screen. Anyone is welcome and invited to join on the screen, just if you want to. So we've had authors, we've had booktubers, we've had people who just watch my channel or other people's channels.
We've had Hugo-nominated bloggers.
We've had Hugo-nominated bloggers, exactly. Yeah, so anyone is more than welcome to join on screen. It's always fun when people join that aren't here every week. And check out the Fireside Discord. There isn't right now, but there will be a link soon in the description of this live stream, so that you can join on screen or you can join to watch. And I'll see you next Sunday.
Cheers.
All right, take care, everyone. Did he just did he just leave without ending the stream? Well, that's awkward.
I don't think he can.
Well, hold on. Oh wow, we're still on there. Might want to get him back. Get him back in here. Be like, hey man,
let's take over the stream.
Yeah, this is the takeover. Some of you, dude, and Raph. Yeah, we've hacked Matt's channel.
Give me a second. I'll just text him. I'll just text him.
Just text him. Let him know.
I mean,
John put up. I'm like, I have other things I want to do today.
You do?
Yes, believe it or not.
Here's the question: like, how long do StreamYard streams run before it actually closes? Because I know, for example, Zoom closed down a call after 24 hours.
I don't know.
Are we going to find out? We just invite more and more people and keep this going. All right, I'm texting Matt right now to tell him how to close to actually close this thing.
Do you see a line over here? Whatever that number is, that's what it is. This thing was at like 90. What was it at, Todd? Was it at 88 or 92 degrees?
Well, that's sad. They could probably hear my my family talking. So
Yeah, we can. Well, I messaged him on Discord. Because we can't close the stream without him. Yeah, Liam, just hop on. Yeah, so yeah, I hope you're having a good time right now. We might gonna turn this into like a couple of hours